TNL Sports Central will be over our next team projection of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Purdue Boilermakers, a team that went 2-4 in the 2020 season. Overall, this team did not have very much of a 2020 season, only being able to play 6 games overall. But Purdue's definitely a team that's got a lot of room for improvement going into the 2021 season, and that's what we're going over here today. We're also going to be going over a few players that this team will be losing, who they were returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with your previous 6 games for Purdue, which was basically their schedule. Once again, they only played 6 games last season. They played Iowa, of course, at home, 24-20. This team was very promising at the start of this season, having a huge win over the Iowa Hawkeyes, which, of course, that was one of Iowa's only losses last season. That team really improved from there. But for Purdue, they kind of went the other way. They did beat Illinois, though, on the road there, 31-24. So they had 2 good wins to start off the season. They did lose to Northwestern, though. 20-27 was the final score there. And that's really what kind of took a turn for Purdue there. But overall, this team did not have a very difficult schedule at all. I mean, this team, the toughest team that this team played all season was Northwestern. Like, this team didn't have to play hardly anyone from the East Division that was really a big impact team. So for Purdue, this team really did not have a difficult schedule, but at the same time, at least they were able to beat Iowa. I mean, that's definitely your signature win of the season there, even though Iowa was not playing their best at that point. But they also lost to Minnesota 31-34, lost to Rutgers 30-37. Then you finished out your season with a loss against Nebraska. 27-37 was the final score there. So for Purdue, I mean, don't get me wrong, this was not a terrible season for Purdue overall. I mean, this team kept their games extremely close. This team never got blown out. They just took 4 pretty close losses there. But then again, they finished out the season 2-4, and considering how crazy of a season 2020 was, I would say this team really did not do all that bad. First 3 games, this team was 2-1. Last 3 games, they were 0-3. So obviously, they did lose their last 4 games there. But looking at your returning production and your roster preview heading into 2021, you return quite a bit here. You return your quarterback, Jack Plummer. He's coming back. If you look at him last season overall, I mean, he was the primary quarterback for Purdue, but I mean, Aiden O'Connell also had a big impact on this team last season. So overall, I think both quarterbacks definitely are going to have split time going into the next season. But if you look at both quarterback stats, we did see Jack Plummer put up just right around 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 71% completion rate. So he did have the better as far as stats are concerned. Aiden O'Connell threw for just over 900 yards and 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 65% completion rate. So Jack Plummer, overall, I'd say was the better quarterback last season. He threw for a better percentage. He had just right around the same amount of attempts as well, a higher number of touchdowns as well. So overall, quarterback situation was kind of split up last season, but overall, it'll be interesting to see which quarterback will be the primary one heading into 2021. As for the running back position, Xander Horvath is coming back. That's going to be a huge return there, as he put up just over 750 yards and 2 touchdowns last season. He's going to be a very high impact player, probably one of the biggest impact players on this entire offense and in this team in general. Like, he's definitely a big highlight right now. Last season, through 6 games, once again, he put up over 700 yards, which, I mean, with 700 yards basically through 6 games, that's basically like if we see a 12-game season, he's pretty much halfway to 1,500 yards on the season. So really, those stats don't look good at first, but through 6 games, I mean, he put up some really impressive stats there. So watch out for him going into next season. As for the wide receiver position, you do return your top wide receiver in David Bell. Last season, he put up just over 600 yards, 8 touchdowns as well. So David Bell is definitely going to be a player to watch out for moving forward as well. So, I mean, you got Xander Horvath and you also got David Bell, both players of which we've got a ton of potential going to next season. As for Milton Wright, he's coming back. He's the second wide receiver on this team as of last season. And if you look at him last season, he put up some pretty good stats as well. I mean, he didn't have as big of an impact as David Bell did, but he put up just over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. They do lose their wide receiver, Rondale Moore. He actually opted out of the 2020 season, so he did not play a single game for this team. Well, actually, he did receive for just over 300 yards as well, but overall, he did not play the entire season for Purdue, is what I should say there. But as for the rest of this team, of course, they do lose 1 offensive lineman, they lose 1 defensive lineman, and 2 linebackers, as well as 1 in the secondary. So this team does lose overall 4 on the defensive side. That will be something to watch out for there. But overall, this team has got some great returning production heading into next season. This team, I think, could be a bowl team next year. I'm not saying that for sure right now, but I think Purdue definitely is a team that could have a good possibility of making it to a bowl game. They've got the talent here. I mean, they've got a decent quarterback with either Jack Plummer or Aiden O'Connell, whichever one is the primary starter. And you also got, I mean, once again, you got a good running back, a good wide receiver. This team does have potential to make it to a bowl game next season. How high could Purdue get is the next question, though. I mean, for Purdue, this team is obviously not going to be a national contender by any means, but I think 6 to 7 wins would definitely be a good season for Purdue heading into next year, and I definitely think 6 to 7 wins is possible for the Boilermakers. As for your schedule, you start off the season against Oregon State, Pac-12 matchup there at home in West Lafayette. So that could come to be a bit of a difficult matchup. I mean, Oregon State's definitely a team that will be improved going into next season. But then, of course, you got UConn on the road. That should be a win. Notre Dame, then you got them on the road. So that's one of your tough non-conference matchups there on the road against Notre Dame. So this team does have a pretty tough non-conference schedule there with Oregon State and Notre Dame, two teams that are halfway decent, especially, I mean, Oregon State is a Power 5 conference team. So this team does have kind of a difficult lineup for the non-conference games, but I mean, you got Illinois after that and Minnesota, so you really don't have to play too terrible of a conference game after your non-conference games there. You do have Iowa on the road after your bye week, so really that's where things are going to start to get really difficult for Purdue. This team's also got to play Wisconsin, Nebraska on the road, Michigan State, Ohio State on the road, Northwestern on the road, and Indiana to finish out the season. So you do have a pretty difficult lineup here going into next season. I mean, you got to play Ohio State and Michigan State as your and Indiana too. Don't forget about them as your crossover games into the Big Ten East. So it's really unfortunate here for Purdue because this team has got the talent to be able to make it to a bowl game, but their schedule is just brutal going into next season. Like, this team's got to play some very difficult opponents in their crossover matchups into the Big Ten East. Once again with Ohio State, Indiana, and don't forget about Michigan State either. So this team has got a pretty difficult lineup going into next season. And once again, that's not even talking about the non-conference matchups with Notre Dame on the road and Oregon State in general. But anyway, looking at the first half of your schedule, I think Oregon State's going to be a close game there. I'd probably favor Purdue right now, but that's going to be a close one there. UConn's going to be a win. Notre Dame's going to be a loss. And as much as I want to say it's going to be a close game for Purdue, I think Notre Dame's just going to be too good at the start of next season. They're going to get the win. Illinois and Minnesota, same thing with Iowa. All those games are going to be pretty close ones. I'd probably favor Purdue right now in the Illinois matchup, so I do think you'll at least have 2 to 3 wins in the first half of your schedule for sure. I'd honestly argue 4. You could easily get 3 to 4, I think, in your first half. But as for the second half, it's going to be much tougher. I think Wisconsin, Nebraska, Michigan State are all going to be close matchups. I'd probably favor each of those teams in those matchups, but Michigan State, that's definitely going to be a close one there. Ohio State on the road, I mean, you never know. I mean, Ohio State's definitely going to be a favorite team in that matchup, and I definitely think the Buckeyes will get the win, but who knows? We could see a massive upset. We did see Purdue beat Ohio State a few years back, so anything's possible there. But Northwestern, I think that's also going to be a close matchup there with it being on the road. Northwestern is not going to be as good next season, though, so who knows? That could be a big road win for Purdue, but otherwise, Indiana matchup is going to be a pretty tough one as well there. Indiana, I do expect to be one of the best teams in the Big Ten next year. So overall, your ceiling for next season is going to be 7-5. So that's the highest possible record that you could get to. But your projection, as much as I want to say Purdue is going to make it to a bowl game, and as much as I think, I mean, the talent on this roster, once again, as I said earlier, does give them potential to make it to a bowl game. But it's just the schedule is so difficult for this team. I mean, especially considering it's a Purdue team that, which, I mean, Purdue being a team that's, I mean, we all can agree it's kind of a mediocre team at college football. That's going to be pretty tough to deal with for this program because you got to play Notre Dame. Like, if you had an easier opponent other than Notre Dame as a non-conference game, like, I could see Purdue definitely getting up to 6 wins, but this team has got to play Notre Dame. You got Oregon State, a Power 5 conference team there. You got several pretty tough games on your lineup here. Your projection will be 5-7 next season. I've got this team just missing a bowl game by one win there, but still, I mean, 5-7, even if you get up to 5-7, I'd still say that's a pretty good season for Purdue. I mean, this team is usually right on the barrier there of a bowl game, and I don't expect them to get to one next season, but I definitely think it's possible. Once again, just because I'm projecting 5-7 does not mean that I'm ruling out Purdue here, but your floor is going to be 3-9, so that's basically going to be the lowest of the low that Purdue could be next season. But anyway, that wraps it up for me today. Once again, projection for Purdue is going to be 5-7, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below on the Boilermakers, as well as your record predictions and all of that. I do appreciate you guys all watching, though. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you all later.